In this presentation, we're going to demonstrate how to use the new features in the version 8 software, being the Vector Texture tool and the Toolpaths options, to help us create some wood grain textures. So let's take a look at the overview for this presentation. So first of all, we're going to have a nice introduction to Woodgrains. We're then going to take a look at 3D wood grain textures. So if we've tried to use wood grain textures before in the software, we've most likely created ourselves a 3D wood grain. We're then going to go and take a look at demonstrating how to do a 2D and a 2.5D type texture wood grain. We're then going to look at some combination toolpaths which we can try and get an even more realistic looking wood grain texture. We're then going to look at the applications to use wood grains, and then we're also going to take a look at the edge finish on using wood grains as well. So the introduction to wood grains. Wood grains are a sought after method to recreate on a CNC machine. You'll find that they are typically nowadays sandblasted using what's called a grain frame and some sign foam, and all the areas where you don't want to have blasted you actually cover with a mask. Now wood grains are a traditional background finish on signs like you can see here, and the new tools in the version 8 software make this much easier to create on a CNC machine. So first of all, we're just going to demonstrate how we would have gone and done this in the past with using a 3D wood grain. So the good thing about 3D wood grains is that we can get a realistic and natural looking finish with 3D wood grains. The not so good is that 3D toolpaths are very time consuming, they're not production efficient, and they are very costly to run. So I'm just going to go into the software now, and I'm going to create a new file, and it's going to be 15 inches wide by 5 inches high. It's going to have a thickness of 3/4 of an inch and keep the rest of the options the same, like so. And the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to import an image that I've found of wood grain, and then I'm going to use that to create myself some 3D wood grain. So I'm going to go to Modeling tab, I'm going to go to this option here to create a component from a selected bitmap, and then I'm just going to go ahead and choose my wood grain, and you'll see that this is my wood grain texture. So all I'm going to do, I'm just going to oversize that slightly, and then I'm just going to stretch it across the whole length of my job, like so. And then I'm just going to go ahead and use a smoothing filter so it's more machine friendly. So I'm just going to take that to about halfway, like so, and just press OK. And then we've got ourselves a very quick and easy to produce 3D component. Now where it gets tricky is when we go to Toolpath that. So if we just go over to the Toolpaths tab, I'm just going to quickly create myself a 3D component. So this should now bring up the material setup like so. And I'm just going to change the home start position to something more sensible and click OK. And I'm going to choose a nice tool just to demonstrate how long these actually do take to run. So I'm going to leave that as the 1/8 inch bore noise. Just going to check the parameters of the tool, like so. Then I'm going to choose the machine limit boundary as the model boundary, and then we can choose the way we want to machine that. So I'm going to start with a rastering strategy and just calculate that toolpath. Now this is not only going to take long to actually calculate as well, it would take a very long time to also run on the machine, as you'll find out in just a moment. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to pause the video and then restart the video once this is calculated. So now that we've calculated the toolpath, let's go ahead and preview what the results are. So as you can see, we can get a nice wood grain effect from using a 3D component and then 3D machining that. The only problem is if we go to take a look at how long this toolpath takes to run. So if we just go to the summary of all toolpaths, you'll see at 200 inches a minute, that's going to take an hour to machine a 15 inch by 5 inch piece of material. Now we should be able to get something up to 4 times quicker by using the new features in the version 8 software. So what we're going to do is we're going to use the Vector Texture tool to help us create some wood grains. So first of all, we're going to choose a small max spacing. We're going to up the variation of the waves. We're going to choose a minute amplitude and a long wavelength, and then we're going to add some noise to those vectors as well to give us a more random look to our wood grain. And then we're going to go ahead and create some 2D wood grains. So we're going to use the Vector Texture tool, we're going to use the Profile on Toolpath, we're going to choose a cut depth to cut down to, and then we're going to vary the tool shape to give us a different type of wood grain texture. Then what we're going to do is we're going to create some wood grain textures with a 2.5D texture toolpath as well. So we're going to use the same vectors, we're going to use the texture toolpath. We could also use the texture toolbox, which is the new gadget which has just recently been released. Then we can also vary the cut depth and vary the tool shape to give us something also completely unique in the wood grain texture. Then we can also create some toolpath combinations, so we can have a 2D toolpath and then overlay a 2.5D type toolpath on top of that, and we can also use projection toolpaths as well. So let's go ahead and create some 2D and 2.5D type toolpaths within the software. So I'm just going to go ahead and close this toolpath summary down here and just turn off this toolpath, go back over to the drawing tab and just turn off my component, and then just go back to the drawing tools, and I'm going to start creating myself some vectors to use for my 2D and 2.5D type wood grains. So let's go into the Create Vector Texture tool, and I'm going to change this to 0 degrees. I'm going to change the spacing to a very minute spacing of 0.1 of an inch. Just going to change the amplitude to even smaller, so 0.05, and then the wavelength is going to be 14 inches. I'm just going to add some noise to this as well. Add some variation to this as well, like so. And the beauty about this tool is the fact that we can just keep pressing preview and we're going to get something completely random each time we press the button. So no 2 times that you press the button are you ever going to get the same pattern again. So when you've chosen a set of vectors that you like, just simply press OK, and we can start working with these vectors. So I'm just going to go back over to the Toolpaths tab now and just highlight my vectors. And then I'm going to go into the 2D Profile toolpath. I'm just going to choose a start depth of 0, I'm going to choose a cut depth of 0.2, and I'm going to choose my tool. So first of all, I'm going to use a 1/4 inch ball nose tool. Just select that, go machine on the vectors, scroll down. Let's call this Profile Ball Nose, like so, and then hit calculate, and just reset the preview and just preview that toolpath. And not only are these faster to create, they're also very fast to preview and fast to run on the machine. So this is what we would get if we ran that 2D ball nose tool on our piece of material. So as you can see, you can get a nice realistic look, and it does actually have a better finish to it than the 3D finished toolpath. Now let's just take a look at how long that takes to run as well. So you see that takes 29 minutes to run the 2D profile. Let's close the toolpath summary and create one now with the V-bit tool. So I'm going to go back into the profile toolpath, going to keep everything the same. I'm just going to change the tool that I'm going to use. So I'm going to use a 1/2 inch V-bit of 90 degrees, select OK, and then simply calculate that. Let's reset the preview. And you see you get quite a nice texture that represents wood grain quite well with the V-bit tool. Now, this is just a standard 2D toolpath. What we can do now is go ahead and utilize a 2.5D type toolpath with the same vectors. So let's close the preview toolpath form, and let's just make sure our vectors are still selected, and go into the texturing toolpath option. Now again, I'm just going to choose my 1/4 inch ball nose tool to start with. I may just change that pass depth to 1/4 inch and press apply, OK. And then I'm going to use this option here which says use selected vectors as the pattern, and then we can go ahead and specify our cut depths. So I'm going to choose the maximum cut depth to be 0.2 and the minimum cut depth to be around the 0.1 area, like so. And then I'm just going to go down, call this texture ball nose, and then just calculate that. Let's just reset that and preview this new toolpath. You see, with the varying depth of the texture toolpath, you do get quite a nice, more detailed look with the ball nose. It's definitely more impressive than the 2D type toolpath that you can get. from the 2D profile toolpath. Now let's go ahead and do that same thing again, but with a V-bit tool. So let's go into the texturing toolpath, choose my 1/2 inch 90-degree V-bit, use the selected vectors as a pattern, just make sure they are still selected like so, and keep the rest of the options the same. Just going to call this texture V-bit and then press calculate, and let's reset that again and then run that toolpath like so. Now you see you get an even nicer toolpath as well with the V-bit tool and using that texturing toolpath. Now the other thing that we can do is actually combine some 2D toolpaths with 2.5D type toolpaths just to see if we can get anything more realistic. So let's just reset that preview, and what I'm going to do is, first of all, I'm going to run the 2D V-bit profile toolpath, so let's just preview that. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to overlay the texture toolpath with the ball nose tool, like so. And what you should see is that the areas of the toolpath where it went down to 0.2 in that texturing toolpath, you'll see that it's gone ahead and then streaked across the V-bit toolpath, which then gives you this nice streaky effect on the wood grain. So let's take a look at how long these take to machine. So I'm just going to go to the toolpath summary, and again you can see if you just look at the profile and the texturing toolpaths, they all run under half an hour. Some even run at 12 minutes, some at 20. So you can see just how much more efficient it is to machine in 2D and 2.5D type toolpaths compared to the standard 3D toolpaths. Not only that, I think you do get a better looking wood grain texture from these toolpaths, and they also give a better finish. So let's take a look now at the applications and edge finish of wood grains. So wood grains, how to add effects without running into other parts. We can use the boundary offset and the ramping, but this can lead to leaving a halo effect. There is also the option to inlay, and also the option to have a chamfered edge finish. So let's take a look at these. So we've got the boundary offset and the ramping. So this is where we go ahead and create a toolpath with a boundary offset. The good thing about this is we avoid going past the boundary. The not so good, however, it does leave a halo effect around the objects that we're not trying to eat into with our tool. Then we have the inlay method. So this is where we create a normal toolpath as normal. Then we go ahead and create a female inlay toolpath, and then we create the male parts separately, and then we can go ahead and put them together afterwards to create one single model like so. Then we have the chamfering offset. So this is where we offset the texture objects by the radius of the tool. The good thing is it leaves a nice chamfered edge. The not so good is for a close finish we need to be using the same tools. So to summarise, the vector texture tool is quick and easy to produce us nice regular and random patterns, especially for wood grains. We've then gone ahead and applied them to 2D and 2.5D type toolpaths, so we've utilised the profile toolpath and the texturing toolpath, and the new option within the texture toolpath to not ramp in and out at the start and ends of each of the vectors has made creating full panel textures a lot easier. So overall, the new features in the version 8 software has made creating CNC wood grains much faster and much easier. And the last thing I'm going to leave you with is go and experiment with all the new features that version 8 brings to creating textures. Thanks for watching.